Hunting Season, Destruction of the Puppet Masters. This book is a work of fiction. Any references to historical events, real people or real places are used fictitiously. Other names, characters, places and events are products of the author's imaginations, and any resemblance to actual events or places or persons, living or dead, is entirely coincidental. Copyright, 2025 by Ace Donovan, Brock Edwards, Mickey Stone. Published and distributed by HoosierHorrorStories.com. Unauthorized reproduction or distribution without the expressed written consent of Ace Donovan or Brock Edwards or Mickey Stone is strictly prohibited. Bible scriptures in this book are from the King James Version. Introduction. Bob Terrell, a teacher in Minceville, Indiana, has his life change on I-69 outside Indianapolis. Returning home to attend a pep rally for the high school basketball team that narrowly lost a state championship, Bob's life changes when he runs over a man right there on the interstate. Who was this man? Why was he crossing a major interstate? Bob doesn't know that the answers are right there in the mind of Ronald Millstone, the school janitor. Chapter 1: The Final Four. Billy Gaines knocked the ball away from Jeremy Rhodes of Bancroft Charter High School, and with a flick of the wrist, he got control of the dribble and drove quickly up the right side of the basketball court. Tommy Reed of Bancroft stabbed at the ball, and with the ease of Steph Curry, Billy G, as the fans called him, swiftly dribbled the ball between his legs and pulled up a step and half behind the three-point line and buried the shot with nothing but net. The crowd cheering for Perrysville Consolidated erupted. 1, 2, 3, bang, 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 they cheered, making 6 shooters with their fingers like an old cowboy movie. No one knows exactly when the tradition started. Nick Hughes, the principal of the school, cringed every time the cheer block led the charge. It certainly was a proper behavior in the current climate of the nation, but inside he loved it and wished he could join in the cheering. Billy Gaines had just hit his 5th three-pointer of the first half and now had 19 points. The PCHS Stallions now led the game 31-26 with just a few ticks left in the second quarter. Perrysville consolidated as a school in 1994. Perrysville sucked up Minceville and Remington, 2 small little burgs in southern Indiana. Perrysville was a growing community, and with news of a Honda plant coming, it would only get bigger. The kids from Minceville and Remington were treated like outsiders by the kids from Percyville. The kids from Perrysville were children of business owners and white-collar parents. The Minceville kids were typically farm kids, southern Indiana hillbillies. Farming cantaloupe, tomatoes, corn, or soybeans. The kids from Remington were primarily children of parents who worked in the coal mine. There was only one large coal mine left in Indiana, and it was just outside of Remington. The Minceville kids and the Remington kids figured they would follow in the steps of their parents. But this was the time for the Minceville and Remington kids. 4 of the starting 5 from the Stallions were from Minceville, and Larry Donnelly was from Remington. Billy Gaines, he was the pride of Minceville. Billy G led the Perrysville Stallions to the Final Four. The season started with a 25-point win over Farmersburg. When head coach Jimmy Buck started the 4 kids from Minceville and 1 from Remington, the Perrysville parents were not happy. Old Buck must be nuts. Playing those hillbillies. They won't win 10 games. Sure, they beat Farmersburg, but we always beat Farmersburg, the naysayers crowed. Then in a holiday tournament just before Christmas, Perrysville Consolidated played at Jeffersonville and beat Evansville Central, and then beat second-ranked Jeffersonville by 3 in overtime to bring home the championship trophy. Even the naysayers began to believe. The noise changed from "Old Buck is nuts" to "Old Buck plays the best kids, he don't care where they are from." But the hardcore businessmen from Perrysville still were not happy, but here they were playing Bancroft Charter School in the Final Four at the Fieldhouse on the Butler campus in downtown Indianapolis. Bancroft Charter was a school of more than 4,000 students. It was like a small college campus. Perrysville, with their recent growth, had just over 900 and was the smallest 4A school in the state. Here they were battling Bancroft and even winning. The horn sounded, signaling the end of the first half, and Perrysville was clinging to a tight 33-28 lead, with Gaines scoring 20 of the points for Percyville. Leon Gaines, Billy's dad, was at the concession stand getting a box of popcorn and a Dr. Pepper when Morgan Smith approached him. Morgan Smith, the smug arrogant man, owned the coal mine and frequented Leon's produce stand. Of course, Morgan Smith showed up more often now that Billy was the star of the Perrysville Stallions. "Billy looks great today," Morgan Smith said to Leon. "He is definitely dialed in today. But those boys from Bancroft are big. Hopefully, they can hold on." "Meyer had a great game last week," Leon said. Leon was complimenting Morgan Smith's middle son. Meyer had scored 5 points off the bench last week when Perrysville defeated Vincennes in the semi-state at the Holman Center in Terre Haute. "He does okay, but Murray, my youngest, is gonna be real good. Maybe the best this school has ever seen," Morgan Smith said. Clearly making a slight on Billy. "Looking forward to getting Billy a job in the office," Morgan said. "We hope he can get into Purdue." "Coach Painter is here today," Leon said, referencing the fact that the head coach of the Boilermakers was here watching the game. He was recruiting Mohamed Mustafa, the 6'10" star from South Sudan playing for Bancroft, and was looking to see if Billy had it in him to play at Purdue. Billy at 6'1" was a little short for the Big Ten, but boy could he handle the ball and shoot. The second half, Bancroft poured the ball into the post and Mustafa was unstoppable. In the end, Mustafa was just too much. Too big. Too strong. Mustafa had 27 points and 21 rebounds, and it was enough to offset the 31 points that Billy scored. Bancroft moved into the state championship game with a 71-60 win. The Perrysville crowd was crushed. The dream was over. As they had all year, the Perrysville team gathered at half court and took a knee and prayed. Even in a loss, they wanted to give glory to their Lord and Savior. Even some of the Bancroft kids came over and joined their circle. That was their real goal, to show and share the love of God. Chapter 2: A celebration. But what about Bob? It was announced through the crowd that there would be a pep session to celebrate the boys' season at Perrysville Consolidated High School at midnight. That would give time for everyone to get back home from Indianapolis, and it would allow the fans who couldn't make it to Indianapolis to celebrate the boys and their accomplishments. The crowd began filing out before the 3A game started as Indianapolis Chatard was playing Evansville Memorial. The boys from Perrysville, Minceville, and Remington boarded the school bus and were very quiet for the first hour, but eventually boys will be boys and they began to regain their normal personalities. Not that the loss was forgotten, but they were talking about the exciting memories from their season. There was a lot to be thankful for. They finished the season with an outstanding 24-2 record. The only loss suffered by the team was a last-second 72-71 loss to Jeffersonville. The Red Devils got their revenge from the holiday tourney. The anticipated third meeting never happened when Jeffersonville stubbed their toe in a loss to Roseburg Catholic in the sectional. Eventually the music was blaring on the bus and the boys were loud and obnoxious. They sang and slapped each other on the back in the 2.5-hour drive home. They began to get more excited as they drove in town and saw all the cars lined up honking their horns and cheering and waving. Midnight finally arrived and the boys filed into the gym and took their seats at the end of the gym. Tina Turner's "Simply the Best" was blaring on the loudspeaker as they took their seats. Cell phones were out documenting the occasion. Somehow, or maybe of course he was, Morgan Smith took the microphone as the MC. Not surprisingly, Morgan Smith started the evening with, "Let's welcome the future of the Stallion program, the 8th graders." Everyone knew this was just the way Smith could make sure that everyone cheered for his youngest son Murray. "Now let's meet our first Final Four team in Perrysville." The crowd was loud and proud. After about 30 minutes the pep session ended and people lingered for a few minutes and the boys left with parents, in twos, or with girlfriends. Morgan Smith was overheard speaking to Coach Jerry Buck, "At least next year you can play Perrysville kids instead of those friggin' Minceville people." As they started closing the gym, Nick Hughes noticed Bob Terrell wasn't there. Bob Terrell was a 29-year-old geometry teacher for Perrysville High School and was arguably the biggest fan of all the Perrysville team's boys and girls. It just wouldn't be normal for Bob not to be here. "Excuse me, Morgan," Nick Hughes said as he approached Coach Buck, "have you seen Bob Terrell? I can't imagine him missing this." In all the excitement and pictures I hadn't even thought about Bob. I guess I just figured he was in the mix of fans somewhere. Of course, the fact he wasn't here cheering us on is strange. Coach Jerry Buck replied. Hey, don't worry about cleaning this all up. Ronald can do it on Monday morning, Nick Hughes said. Chapter 3 Tragedy on Interstate 69. Bob Terrell was on his way to the pep session. He loved to see his kids, as he called them, have success in the field of competition. He loved teaching and being a part of the school community. He didn't have a girlfriend, yet. He was definitely fond of Jessie McClure, the 26-year-old health and PE teacher and current volleyball coach at Perrysville Consolidated. Bob had actually asked Jessie to ride along to the game, but she was going home to see her parents this weekend. They lived in Chicago. Bob was rolling along listening to an old Newsboys CD when suddenly something clipped the corner of his car. Bob slammed on his brakes and lost control. The car veered into the left-hand lane on Interstate 69 and a semi-truck just behind him suddenly hit the object that had made contact with Bob's car. The item exploded. Imagine a bag of spaghetti being dropped from a plane and landing with a splat. The semi narrowly missed Bob's car as it violently swung back to the right and dropped into a ditch and toppled to the side. The semi jackknifed it and then screeched and chugged and eventually found the guardrail and came to a stop. The man driving the semi hopped down from the cab and ran across the interstate to check on the person driving the Honda Civic. He was running and calling 911 at the same time. Within a half hour, the road was closed. People were being routed into the northbound lane. They had to clean this mess. It was a body, not a deer in nor lasagna or anything else. It was a body. It would take days to identify the body. It was a complete and utter mess. Bob Terrell was placed in an ambulance and taken to the Indiana Med Center. He seemed to be fine, with the exception of a minor concussion and potential broken ankle, and was showing the effects of potential shock. The X-rays confirmed it. Bob had a broken ankle. It would require surgery. He would be in the hospital for at least 4 days. When Bob finally woke on Monday morning, he hit the call button, and a nurse came in walking swiftly. Mr. Terrell. Are you okay? The nurse asked. Bob was hoarse. Can I have something to eat and drink? He said. I am famished. Oh wow, sure Mr. Terrell, what would you like? The nurse said. Can I have pancakes? Bob Terrell asked. Let me call down to the cafeteria. Are you sure you are okay? Mr. Terrell, the nurse asked. Can I get some Tylenol? Bob asked. I have a terrible headache. Of course, I will be right back, the nurse said. When she came back, Bob was tossing and turning and then suddenly sat up quickly. Help, he screamed. Chapter 4 On the Mend. After heartily finishing off a stack of pancakes, a hospital stack too, Bob was beginning to drop off to sleep when the door to his room pushed open and a tall brown-skinned man entered and extended a hand to shake Bob's. I'm Dr. Habib Azaz. You had a really serious injury. We have stabilized your ankle, but it is a serious break. I am going to schedule some X-rays and an MRI, so we can really see what damage has been done. We will schedule to take place in a couple of days. There is too much swelling for us to truly know the damage right now, he concluded. Bob merely nodded his head in agreement and appreciation. I will be in again tomorrow, Mr. Terrell. Try to rest and make sure you ask for Tylenol when you need it. You are going to be in pain for quite some time, the DR added. Thank you, Dr. Azaz, Bob said as he reached his hand out and Dr. Azaz shook it before leaving the room. Bob heard voices in the hallway. After a couple of moments, there was a slight knock at the door and again it opened and in stepped Jessie McClure. Well, Mr. Terrell, you have got yourself into quite a predicament, she said with a smile. Hi, Miss McClure, Bob said as his spirits were immediately lifted. Jessie knew better than to discuss the accident. The death of the unknown person who was found literally in bits across Interstate 69. Jessie knew about the horror left on the road and had no idea how much Bob remembered, but she knew that she needed to be there for her friend. So, how sore are you? Jessie said in a forceful, questioning manner. Well, on a scale of 1 to 10, it's a tornado, Bob said as they both chuckled. Actually, It isn't bad right now thanks to my friend, Bob said with a nod to the morphine drip. The martini of good vibes, Jessie said as she smiled. When I tore my rotator cuff it was the closest thing I had to sleep. So, I get it, she said. How soon are you going to escape from here, she asked. I get the feeling it is going to be a few days. They still aren't sure of the complete amount of damage in the ankle. MRI and more x-rays to come, he said, feigning excitement. Well, if you need a ride home, I might could clear my schedule, Jessie said with a wink. Wait, aren't you supposed to be with your parents for spring break? Bob asked. When I heard about the accident, I felt you might need a friend. I mean if you want 1 inch, Jessie said. Of course, he said, friendship is always needed. Bob's eyes began to become cloudy as the morphine effect was beginning to come into effect. Hey, I will see you tomorrow, Jessie said as she grabbed Bob's hand and gave it a gentle squeeze. Bob slipped away into sleep and was very happy. Chapter 5, Getting Released. Mr. Terrell, you did great. Just remember to use the boot during the day and in the evenings while at home, you can walk on your own accord. That will allow you to continue to build your strength. You only need to do that for maybe 2 weeks. You will know. The walking boot will give you stability. I don't have any doubt that you are going to be fine. Your rehab has done great, the rehab nurse said. I can't thank you enough. You girls are great. I just can't thank you enough, Bob Terrell said on his 12th week of rehabilitation. Bob had completed the school year using pre-recorded YouTube videos and trusting substitute teachers to get the students to do the work. It certainly wasn't an ideal way to try and teach, and quite frankly Bob didn't care for any of it. Much like during the pandemic, it was not good. He was looking forward to this year and seeing his students face to face again. The one-on-one contact was what Bob looked most forward to. Seeing the kids smile and noticing the light go off when a student finally got it. Students who normally disliked boring history found themselves being captivated by the stories that Mr. Terrell would tell. Who cared if he took a little poetic justice in the stories? They loved them. I think your ride just arrived, the nurse said as Bob turned to see Jesse McClure. Bob knew he could have driven on his own, but might as well be safe, and honestly, Jesse was the driver, he had thought to himself. Did he pass? Jesse asked the nurses. You know teachers can be the worst students. He was adequate, the nurse said with a wink and a chuckle. Jesse, Bob and 2 other nurses joined in the chuckle. Ready? Jesse asked Bob. I was born ready, even Bob cringed at that. Oh okay, Jesse said, rolling her eyes. Truth was Jesse saw Bob's awkwardness as cute. Bob grunted as he climbed into the Jeep Patriot of Jesse's. You okay? Jesse asked. I am good. Gonna take a while longer, Bob responded. What's your plan for tomorrow? Jesse asked. I thought I might get into my classroom and do a little work, Bob responded. Would you like some help? Jesse asked. Well, of course, I would, Bob said. I can't imagine having a cuter assistant. Again, cringeworthy, again awkward and yet so cute, Jesse thought. I will be by to get you at 1, if that is okay, Jesse said. See you then, Coach, Bob said as Jesse's Jeep rolled to a stop in front of Bob's house. Jessie thought to herself. I just can't help myself. That man is indeed a good man. Bob turned and waved as he opened the door to the little house. Chapter 6, Meeting Ronald Millstone. Bob Terrell was placing his textbooks in order and getting things in order as Jesse McClure was placing a border around the bulletin board found in the back of the room. Bob was alerted to the door as a man stepped into the room. Hi Mr. Terrell, the man said. Glad to see you back, the man said. Thanks, Mr. Millstone, Bob said. Oh gosh, call me Grunt, Ronald Millstone said. Goes back to my days as a United States Marine, he said. Okay Mr. Grunt, Bob said. Jesse chuckled in the back of the room. Oh hi, Miss McClure. Didn't see you back there, Ronald said. Just trying to help Mr. Terrell get his room together, Jesse said. Still a member of the Walking Wounded, Bob said as he lifted his left leg showing the walking boot. No offense of course, you know, for a real warrior. Ronald turned and looked behind him. Oh, you mean me? Gonna take more than that to get me offended. Injuries are injuries, no matter how you get them, Ronald said. Yes sir, Semper Fi, Bob replied. We've been praying for you at church. It's just good to see you. If you need something, just let me know. Been polishing floors this week, so I will be around. Nice to see you, Miss McClure, Ronald said. Nice to see you, Ronald, Jessie said. Thank you, Mr. Grunt, Bob said as Ronald just shook his head and smiled, as did Jessie. Jessie and Bob continued to get the class ready, and after an hour of work, Jessie asked, Hey, we got volleyball practice at 3:30. Wanna come to practice and then maybe we could go get some pizza? You ain't just whistling Dixie that I would. Pizza is my kryptonite, Bob said. Oh okay, Superman, Jessie said with a sly smile. Chapter 7 Volleyball Practice. Bob Terrell took a seat in the third row even with the net and watched practice. Jessie McClure and her team went about their practice, and at their first water break several of the girls came over and welcomed Bob back to school with hugs and plenty of "Glad you're back, Mr. T." Ronald Millstone walked into the gym and was looking up at the lights, making sure all the lights were shining brightly for the beginning of school. He saw a light that needed to be replaced over the visitors' side of the bleachers. Want me to leave the visitors in the dark, Miss McClure? He said with a smile. Of course, she said with a smirk. He grinned. Millstone then walked around to the side of the gym where Bob was sitting. He walked up the couple of rows and sat down beside Bob. Well, here we are again, Mr. Terrell, he said. Well indeed, Mr. Grunt, Bob said. You and Miss McClure a thing, Mr. Terrell, Millstone said with both a question and statement. Honestly just friends, but hey, you know, I can always hope, Bob said as he gave a little elbow to Ronald. Ronald winked. She is a good woman. And you know, a good woman is like a fine pearl. Ronald paused. Keep that in mind. I shall, Bob replied. You grow up around here, Bob? Ronald asked. No sir, I grew up in northern Indiana, near Elkhart. I went to Purdue and followed a girl down here to Clarksville. Ronald raised his eyebrows. No, she found a man from Louisville and decided I had nothing to offer, so I got a job here a couple of years ago, and well, last year was a sad end to a great year, what with that accident and all the rehab, he concluded. Gotcha. I grew up a military brat. Bounced around from coast to coast. Dad was an amphibian assault officer and I wanted to be like him. So, I joined the Marines like him. I was infantry, and during a sweep of a village outside of Kabul, one of those nasty turds stabbed me with a pitchfork. Can you believe that? A pitchfork? Ronald raised his shirt and showed Bob the scars from the holes of a pitchfork. Lost a kidney and well, the career was over. Wound up here in the transportation department after a few years of bouncing around. Late last year, they transferred me here to the high school. I love it. Good kids and good administration, he said. He paused as an errant volleyball came flying at them. He put an arm up and the ball bounced off and Bob caught it with one hand. Woohoo, Mr. T, one of the girls yelled. Bob rolled it back onto the court. Jessie glanced and gave Bob a look as if to say, didn't really think you were athletic. Where do you live now, Ronald? Bob asked. I live about 5 miles out of town. A small little farmhouse, 2 bedrooms that I share with my German shepherd named Hank. It has a barn, and it has 5 acres. Me and Hank hunt and drive a 4-wheeler around. You should come by and go for a ride. There is room for 4 on my rig. You can bring a date, he said with a wink. The two were interrupted as Jessie blew her whistle. Bring it in, Jessie said as all the girls gathered. Ronald and Bob silenced their speaking. They could not hear what Jessie was saying. But they broke out and the girls began picking up the volleyballs and putting them in the baskets and pushing them to the athletic closets. Jessie walked to where Bob and Ronald were sitting. What did you think? She asked. State championship or bust, Bob said as they all chuckled. Get out of here with that, Jessie said. Pizza? She asked. Of course, Bob said as he grunted and began getting up as Ronald got up as well. Seriously, Bob, come by and see the place, Ronald said. I will, of course, Bob said. Chapter 8 A Glimpse at Ronald's Life. Ronald parked the four-wheeler in the barn and was pushing the door shut when he heard a loud rumbling coming down his driveway. He squinted into the sun and looked as a blond man and came screeching up the driveway in a go-kart that had clearly been altered. "What in tarnation?" Ronald said to Hank. Hank gave a small bark in response. The makeshift go-kart came to a screeching and sprawling stop, and Ronald couldn't help but laugh as the blond man crawled from the go-kart and stood up. "Trey? What in the wide world of sports is that?" Ronald said. Trey laughed. "I have been building this in my barn. I call it Roadie, like Roadster," Trey said with another giggle. "I built this thing so we can race. My Roadster against your four-wheeler," he said. "You gotta be kiddin'," Ronald said. Trey was Ronald's friend. Ronald was 10 years older than Trey, and they met through a mutual friend. Rodney Meeks, better known as Bucky. They had been hunting several times and Trey was an expert shot. Trey was an expert in MCMAP. Marine Corps Martial Arts. In short, Trey was a bad man. Trey had a barndominium. Inside it was a half-court basketball court and a shooting range, inside. Ronald wasn't really sure where Trey got his money and never asked. Ronald and Trey had secrets from each other and secrets with each other. One thing Ronald knew was that he was glad he and Trey were friends. Trey wasn't always around. He would sometimes vanish for months. He told Ronald that he had another house that he shared with his twin Ty. Trey told Ronald that it was best that he didn't know where Trey's other house was located. "It is never good to know more than you need to," Trey had told him. The three of them, Ronald, Trey, and Hank, walked into the backyard and sat under a shade tree and a couple of lawn chairs. After some discussion of the weather and an argument about who would win a race between Ronald's four-wheeler and Trey's modified go-kart, things turned serious. "We really kind of botched that accident on 69, Ronald said. "What do you mean?" Trey said, running the three words together. "Well, a teacher from the local high school also hit the target," Ronald said. "Right, I saw that in the local paper," Trey said. "Well, I know the teacher. His name is Bob Terrell. He is a good man," Ronald said. Trey glared at Ronald. "You should have told me. It could be confusing, you need to keep it professional." "He can't know that you know the driver of the semi," Trey said. Ronald continued to whittle at a stick. "I would never reveal that you were the driver of the semi." "Good, it has to remain an accident. As far as the state police go, I am a German truck driver named Lars Knudsen and I live in New York City." Ronald said. "Semper Fi," Ronald said. "R.A.," Trey said as he rose and walked back to his new buggy and fired it up. Chapter 9, Questioning the Outcomes. Ronald Millstone and Trey were on their way to Illinois to meet Rodney "Bucky" Meeks to talk about where the next steps their mission would take them. The two were quietly riding in Ronald's F-150. His truck was bright red, and other than the bright color and raised white letter Firestone tires, it looked like any other vehicle on the road. The quiet was interrupted when Ronald spoke. "Trey, sometimes I struggle with what we do," he said. "What we do?" Trey said. We kill people, Trey, we kill people," Ronald said. "We save people by eliminating bad men." "Really bad men, Ronald. These men are willing to do terrible things for their enjoyment or the enjoyment of others. They can destroy the lives of males and females as young as 7 or 8 and assume no one will miss them. We are removing that from our society," Trey said. "But what people are we saving? Who's freeing the children that are a part of this sex trafficking and the horrendous things that are done to them?" Ronald said. "Ronald, we are not alone in the shield of Abraham. There are others. There are those who rescue the victims. That isn't always our mission." "You aren't quite ready for that, Ronald," Trey said. "It can be very dangerous. It may require some hand-to-hand interaction. It may call you to kill someone looking them straight in the eye. What we do is simple. Capture a person, sedate them, bag them, and then hit them with the semi-truck and end it. That is a lot different than stabbing a man in the throat as he looks at you," Trey concluded. "You have done that, Trey? You have stabbed a man in the throat as he looks at you?" Ronald asked. Didn't you kill men in combat, Ronald? Trey asked. Well, sure, but I mean it was for the freedom and protection of the American people, right? God, family, and country, Ronald said. This is just more personal. I get it. It can be difficult. This is still about freedom and protection. But this isn't for a country that may or may not respect us or even care if we die. But for these kids, these people, Ronald, this is everything, Trey said. Even in the Word, it says there is a time to kill. Right? Ecclesiastes 3 verse 3. You know that scripture, and this isn't taking it out of context. This is the season we are living in now. If not now, then when? If not us, then who? This, Ronald, this is our destiny. No, wait, this is our calling, Ronald. This is far bigger than what we did in the military, and you know I don't diminish that, Trey said. Semper Fi, Ronald said. R.A., Trey said as gave a fist bump to Ronald. Chapter 10, Who was it on I-69? Bob Terrell was sitting at a computer planning for the first couple of weeks at school and was doing research on the founding of America as a nation. He was scrolling through the internet and looking at different articles on the founding. Those woke articles speaking ill of the colonization of America and those who taught it was inevitable. Conquer and colonize was the true sign of the times. He was jotting down notes when he found himself looking up information on his accident on I-69. It haunted him, and this was the first time he really faced that haunting. The man had never been identified. As he continued to fall into the rabbit hole, he discovered that the accident coincided with the disappearance of an Indianapolis hedge fund manager by the name of Peter Wade Sky. He worked for Trollsky Capital right there in the state's capital. The part that Bob couldn't research was that Peter Wade Sky was a member of the Lords of Brimstone, a satanic organization. They control much of Hollywood and many large businesses, and because of that, they also have hands in the pockets and at times around the neck of many politicians, both in America and worldwide. They are a true force in society. Most of the time secretly, though there was that ridiculous pushing of the Illuminati. It was merely a red herring. Don't look here, look there. They staged all kinds of hideous events to distract you from focusing on what was really happening. They are the biggest bunch of drug trafficking, sex trafficking, and human trafficking in the entire world. They control 95% of the global media. Most of these people are unknown. When they rise to the top of the Lords of Brimstone, they don't even report income. They are protected by the media and the politicians. They are some of the wealthiest, though no one would ever know. They help to orchestrate wars. They don't care who wins because their wealth grows regardless of the victors. So much for to the victors goes the spoils. Divide the people with things such as BLM and transgender and abortion and gun control and anything else that can help break down families and friends. Bob sat staring at his computer when Jesse McClure walked into his classroom. Hey, Jesse, you got a minute? There's something I would like to talk to you about, Bob said. Jesse sat on one of the desks and looked at Bob. Okay. Not here. Can we go to Common Grounds and grab some lunch? He asked. Of course, she said. Bob turned off his computer and turned off the light, locked his door, and the two left. Chapter 11, The Truth on I-69? The morning of the accident on I-69, Peter Wade Sky was in the middle of his afternoon jog on the River Walk in Indianapolis. His earbuds were set to his favorite podcast. He was hoping to see that young co-ed from IUPUI. The one he had sat and talked to one day, and as he ogled her tight near-perfect body. The days of old when he was suddenly struck across the kneecaps with an aluminum bat. Down went Wade Sky. He rolled in pain, and before he knew what happened, Ronald had injected a special MJ cocktail and Wade Sky was fighting for his life. A battle he would lose. Ronald Millstone knew that any evidence was be spread widely on the highway just a few minutes later. Ronald threw the limp body of Peter Wade Sky over his shoulder, and with a quick grunt or two he carried Wade Sky to the back of his F-150 and tossed it in the bed. He strapped Wade Sky to a bale of hay to just help confuse the medical examiner as they tried to identify anything about Wade Sky. He closed the utility lid on his truck and hopped in the cab and fired it up. Ronald grabbed a burner phone from his console and texted Trey, "Will the Stallions win today?" "No way," was the response. The message was clear. Wade Sky had been neutralized, and Trey's response meant he was in the semi and rolling down I-69 and would be at the rendezvous right on schedule. Ronald drove to the proper mile marker and then hit a button in the roof of his truck, and the bed dropped open, and with a few rocker chair moves the bale of hay hit the ground with body bouncing about. Trey saw the hay and was ready for the target, but something happened. The rope broke loose, and the body rolled. Bob saw the hay and swerved but connected to the limp body of Peter Wade Sky. Trey, just moments behind, made direct contact as hay and body parts exploded about. Bob slid into the ditch and Trey's semi jackknifed it and plunged into the median. Trey ran from the semi and ran to the line of trees. Ronald was waiting at the next exit. Trey dove into the back of F-150, which was inhabited by the body of Peter Wade Sky, and Ronald sped away. Bob would live with the notion that he had killed a man with his car. But as investigators continued to find the results of the accident, it was ruled the man was possibly trying to cross the highway, and in the early night skies, Bob could not have seen him. There were no charges, and the driver of the semi was of course never found. Even though Bob was found not at fault, he would be haunted for the rest of his life at the thought that he had killed a man. He would never know that all he did was make contact with a cadaver. Chapter 12. Bob tries to make connections. A week ago, Bob told Jesse McClure about his findings. The stories of the missing Peter Wade Sky. But the Indiana State Police said they never found out who the person was, Jesse said, adding, "You think you figured it out? Don't you think the ISP would have discovered that? Maybe they did and don't want to say. Maybe it is a cover-up of some kind," Bob said. Today Bob was scanning the internet again. Bob decided to dip his toe into the dark web. He was looking into Peter Wade Sky, and as he waded deeper, he was suddenly face to face with a picture of Wade Sky. He stared into the eyes of Wade Sky. "Who are you?" Bob mumbled to himself. Bob finally thumbed to the next page. There was a picture of Wade Sky with his arm around Darian Woodley, the star of the new cop drama Blue Rhythm. Now Bob was even more confused, and then there it was. Wade Sky was with a group of men. Bob recognized several of them. The paragraph under the photo provided the detail. This alleged organization was called the Lords of Brimstone. They controlled 95% of the media and most of the internet search engines. According to these dark web nerds, Bob chuckled to himself, there is something known as Ezekiel 33. It was a special report. Bob began to straighten in his chair, and his smile turned to a bit of a grimace. "Bob, what have you found?" he again thought to himself. According to this report, over 35 financial leaders had died in this same way. They had been found scattered all over a highway. Bob tilted his head sideways. He was putting together the pieces. If these dark web people know what they are talking about, this is huge, and somehow Bob had stumbled into it. Literally stumbled into it. What Bob did not know was that Bucky Meeks, a member of the Shield of Abraham, was leaking the info to the Ezekiel 33 report. Bucky knew that underground conspiracy theorists were the ones that would spread the information. It was a way for the Shield to get people to open their eyes. Bucky knew that slowly the mainstream folks would start to question the things they see and hear. Maybe they just could not take what the government fed them as all the truth. The ridding of these members of the Lords of Brimstone was known as Operation Devolution. The devolution was full-blown. Chapter 13. Meeting Trey. Bob was on his way to the local Aldi to grab a few groceries when he saw Ronald standing in the front yard of a large barndominium. Ronald was talking to a big blonde, and Bob thought he would pull in and say hi. Bob parked his vehicle and hopped out as Ronald waved, and Trey watched silently. "Hi, Ronald, Mr. Grunt," Bob said as Trey furrowed his eyebrows as if to question the name. "Hi Bob," Ronald said, "this is my good friend, Trey. We were brothers in the Corps." Trey nodded and reached out a hand to Bob. "Bob Terrell. Me and Ronald worked together at the high school." Trey simply nodded. "This place is yours, Trey?" Bob asked. "It is," Trey said. "You, like to see in a bit." Bob excitedly shook his head yes. The three men entered Trey's special house. Trey stood in the middle of his living room and basically just pointed out different rooms. Bob thought it was odd but figured Trey to be a private person. If only he knew the real Trey. "Have a seat," Trey said. Trey grabbed a remote and flipped on some light music. The music was that of Phil Driscoll. A mixture of instrumental and song. "So how you been, Bob?" Ronald asked. "I've been good. Still reeling from that accident on I-69". Bob replied. Trey spoke. "Oh, that was you that hit that guy on the highway. That was tragic, certainly nothing you could do." Bob shook his head yes and then reached in his jacket pocket. "But there is this. I found it on the internet." He took the paper and stood and handed it to Ronald. Ronald began reading the article entitled, "Who are the Lords of Brimstone?" Ronald pretended to be amused and surprised. Ronald was secretly admiring the work of Bucky Meeks. He was well aware of this article and had read it numerous times. Bob spoke. "Do you think the guy I hit was one of those guys mentioned in that article?" "I can't imagine that. I mean, these guys are big-timers. You know, males and females found in New York City, L.A., Paris, you know, big-time places," Ronald said. "I suppose you are right. You might be right. I could just be paranoid. I mean, I found that on the dark web. You know where conspiracies live," Bob said. "Ronald made the sound of the Twilight Zone, a dimension of the mind," he said. Ronald handed the article back to Bob. Bob pushed it back into his jacket pocket. "Well, you boys enjoy your day," Bob said as he rose. Trey stood and saw Bob out of his gorgeous abode. "You have a good day," Trey said. Trey watched Bob drive away and then turned and looked at Ronald. "Is he going to be a problem?" Ronald replied, "He is a smart man. Even if he knows, what does that mean?" True. "I just don't like loose ends," Trey said. "This has definitely been a bit of a Charlie Foxtrot." Ronald nodded. "Yep. No bueno." Chapter 14. Hello, Bucky. Early Saturday morning, Trey and Ronald met and went for a run through Trey's 25 acres of woods. Trey had marked off a difficult course and Ronald fell in behind. They were dressed in full camo and complete with backpacks. They had to scale over fallen timber and run through muddy, almost dried-up creek beds. It was challenging and the two huffed, puffed, and grunted their way through the obstacles. They sometimes had to slow to a walk to get through the obstacles. It was a real challenge. As the two men appeared out of the woods, they gave each other a fist bump. "That was a journey," Ronald said. "R.A.," Trey said. "Is that Bucky's car?" Ronald said. Sitting in the driveway was a pristine charcoal-colored '69 GTO. It had black rims and red brake calipers. It was a hot ride. "That is definitely Bucky's ride," Trey said. The two of them walked in the side entry where it led directly to the half-court gym inside of Trey's house. Inside, Bucky Meeks was firing shots at the basket. "You know, a jump shot requires feet actually leaving the ground. I am not sure I can slide an index card under your toes," Trey said. "Send your concerns to Bucky at Nut and Button It." "That's Bucky at Nut and Button It." "In your face," he said as he banked in a 15-footer. "The bank closed a couple of hours ago," Ronald said as the three men gave each other one-armed bro hugs. "We need to talk, boys," Bucky said. Chapter 15. New Mission. The three men entered Trey's living room and sat facing each other as Ronald spoke. "By the way, Bucky, thanks for keeping my ride nice for me," he said with a big smile. "Oh yeah, your ride, huh," Bucky said with hearty laugh. "Didn't you promise me that, or am I confused?" Ronald said. Bucky continued to laugh. "I think you have breathed too many fumes from students' pukes." All three of the men got a huge laugh from that. "Look guys, Mr. Sir has given us a new directive." "Well, not really us, but you. I'm just delivering the message. You have 30 targets to negotiate and eliminate," he concluded. "So, there are only 30 of these cockroaches left?" "I wondered how many needed to be taken down," Ronald said. Bucky continued, "Mr. Sir is sending a message that America is free to bring these, cockroaches, into the light. No more remaining quiet about these people. If they know evil lurks, expose it. Trey leaned forward in his easy chair. Black Betty is ready. Where are we going? Bucky held his hand up in a stop position. No, Trey, no more highway smashes of evil people. There is a new MO, Mr. Sir's new plan, and it is kinda twisted, is to gather 30 targets in the next 8 months. That gives you until June 15th to complete the task. What happens on June 15th? Ronald asked. No idea. Hopefully I will know by June 14th, Bucky said with a bit of a crooked smile. Anyway, here is a list of 30 targets including their names and addresses and many of their tendencies to allow you to get the best information needed. The timeline is up to you. You just need to get it done, Bucky said. Ronald asked, and will be paid handsomely? Trey said, you don't need to ask that. You know that answer. Bucky interrupted, you have complete disposal of anything you need. We have pilots, access to weapons, and of course I will provide any computer knowledge needed. Trey laughed and said, so those community college computer classes are finally coming in handy. Bucky rolled his eyes, funny. So, you accept, I presume? Trey nodded. Was there any doubt? True, Bucky said. Gee Wally, does that mean I don't have to breathe the puke fumes any longer? Ronald said. Chapter 16. The Fat Lady Starts to Sing. The next 8 months was both exhausting and exhilarating for Trey and Ronald. They had flown, drove, or sometimes ran for over 120,000 miles. Each mission was quiet, subtle, similar, and more importantly successful. Trey and Ronald would find a time the target would be alone, and the attack was quick but certainly not painless. Ronald would stop the cockroach and Trey would snap their neck. No gunpowder and no mess, just death. Strangely, each body was sent back to a house in the middle of nowhere outside Minceville. A secret cabin. They would put the bodies in a box designed for an electric bike. It was an oddity that the electric bike was similar in weight to a full human. If the human was larger than the norm, the body would be cut in half and packaged in 2 boxes. Each body was hermetically sealed, and it would make its way through Homeland Security. At some point Mr. Sir would explain the final stage. Chapter 17. Take cover. Ronald had been home for a month or so and was hanging out on his front porch drinking a sweet tea and rocking in a porch swing. He heard a car rolling onto his driveway and looked to see Bob Terrell pull in his truck. Ronald hadn't seen Bob in a couple of months. Ronald gave a wave and Bob parked the truck, and with a creak of the door Bob hit the ground with both feet and joined Ronald on the porch, taking a space right beside him. How you doing, Ronald? You must have taken retirement seriously because I didn't see you around for almost 6 months. Where did you go? The folks at school missed you, Bob said as they both steadied the swing. Oh man. Did a little traveling. Kicking butts and taking names, Ronald said. Of course, unbeknownst to Bob, Ronald was literally kicking butts and taking names. It wasn't just a quick-witted response. I bet you were, Bob said. I was wondering if you could give me some help with the truck. I was taking Miss McClure to dinner last night and it started knocking and I am not sure what to do. I can give you the history of automobiles but cannot fix any of them, Bob said with a laugh. Sure, let's take a look, Ronald said as they stepped down off the porch. Ronald nudged Bob with his elbow. You and Miss McClure, huh? She has those female athletic curves, eh? Bob was a little embarrassed and not sure what to say, although it would not be genuine to say he hadn't noticed the way she looked in spandex as she coached the girls. Well, a gentleman wouldn't say anything about his lady, Bob finally was able to say. Ronald laughed as he stuck a bit of Copenhagen in his cheek. Enough said. I like her spandex too, Ronald said with a hearty laugh. Bob was definitely embarrassed now. It was like Ronald had read his mind. Go ahead and hop in there and fire it up and let's see how she rumbles, Ronald said. With another creak of the door Bob hopped into the front seat and fired it up. Give me a little acceleration and try and keep it constant. Just kinda let it idle as if we were going about 40 miles per hour, Ronald said. Bob wasn't sure how to do that and gave it a little too much juice. Whoa there, Andretti, back it off, Ronald said with a little spit to the side. Wait, you hear that, Bob? Ronald asked. Bob thought Ronald was asking about the truck and replied no. Ronald yelled over the roar of the engine, "Cut the engine, Bob." Bob did as he was told and immediately heard the loud siren coming from town. "That is the tornado siren. Let's go. Follow me," and Ronald took off on a sprint. Bob fell into step just a few strides behind. Ronald turned the corner behind the house and ran towards a door just a few inches off the ground. Ronald opened and quickly made his way down steps, and Bob followed into a storm cellar built by Ronald himself. Ronald built not just a storm cellar but a huge storm cellar. He had converted an old wine cellar into a storm cellar. He rarely went into the back of the cellar, and for that matter only entered the front of the cellar to put in occasional supplies. Ronald knew if the proverbial shit hit the fan, he could lock the door from the inside and live there for at least a month without coming out for supplies. Ronald locked the door to the cellar so that the suction from the storm would not be able to blow the door open. They slipped down to the main room where there was a homemade bench and they both took a seat. Ronald grabbed a bottle of water and tossed it to Bob. "Drink up, fella," Ronald said with a laugh. The two of them hunkered down for a few minutes when Bob started feeling antsy and got and walked towards the back of the cellar. "Used to be an old wine cellar and I converted it to a storm cellar and my own bug-out camp," Ronald said. Ronald reached into a drawer and emerged with 2 military-grade flashlights. "Here you go," he said, handing one to Bob. They both switched them on and both started toward the old wine cellar. "What the heck?" Ronald suddenly said. "What is that?" "A bicycle collection," Bob said. Ronald knew immediately what it was. Someone had hidden the 30 dead assets in their electric bike boxes. He didn't know who. It could not have been Trey because he was with him. Maybe Trey's brother Ty. Ty might know of the secret cellar. All Ronald knew is that Bob had to be distracted. He could not let Bob open the boxes. Not even one. It is an idea. I have to make a little extra money. Gonna try and place them in a couple of small towns around and have them hooked up for rentals. You know, make Minceville on par with Indy," Ronald said with a nervous laughter and a quick spit of snuff. "Let's go back topside. See if it is safe." "Sure," Bob said, much to the relief of Ronald. Chapter 18. After the storm. Ronald and Bob stepped out into the darkening skies. The storm had passed, but the skies remained cloudy and there was dampness in the air. You could smell the smoldering of downed lines. Ronald looked toward the driveway and Bob's truck had been blown sideways into a maple tree that lined Ronald's parking area. "Well, Bob, if you got good insurance, you don't have to worry about the knocking," Ronald said as both of them chuckled. "Wow, just look," Bob said. There were limbs, and as they walked up to a clearing, they could see trees downed all over. "This must have been bad," Bob said. "Good thing you had that cellar." "No kidding," Ronald said as he grabbed Bob by the shoulders and had him face Ronald's half-roofless house. "I lost a roof." "Oh no," Bob said. Over the next couple of hours Ronald and Bob looked around Ronald's wet kitchen. The area above the kitchen was where the roof had blown off. Both of them heard many police and ambulance sirens. They had no idea how much damage was laid to the county. "Listen. I think I better head home and check out my own place for damage," Bob said. "Not sure you are going anywhere in that truck," Ronald said. "Let me take you home on the four-wheeler," Ronald said. "It may be a little safer." "Okay," Bob said. The two of them drove the couple of miles to Bob's house. There were areas where they had to walk and push the four-wheeler. They would learn this was the worst twister in southern Indiana history. Overall, there would be a dozen deaths and several other injuries, and many were left without power. They turned right into Bob's front yard and saw the Jeep that belonged to Jessie McClure. She quickly opened the door and ran into Bob's arms, almost knocking him over. "I couldn't get a hold of you. I was so worried," she said. Bob patted his pockets. "I guess I lost it. Everything has been so crazy," he said. Bob realized she was hugging him tightly and returned the action. "I am going to head back to the place. Need to take pictures and try and clean up the place," Ronald said. Bob spoke to Jessie. Ronald lost part of his roof. It was incredible. He has this storm cellar. It may have saved our lives, Bob said. Which reminds me, I can't believe I haven't asked, but Ronald, do you want to stay with me? You can't sleep there. Thanks for the offer, Bob, and I might take you up on it. But I need to get back. Hey, look at that sun, Ronald said. Okay, call me if you need. Well, I guess just come back since I don't have a phone, Bob said. If I find your phone, I will bring it back, Ronald said. As Ronald straddled his four-wheeler, he could hear Jesse asking Bob where his truck was, and they began talking back and forth without pause. Ronald turned the key and fired the four-wheeler and headed not for home, but to Trey's. Chapter 19: The Bikes. Ronald didn't ride the four-wheeler home, instead he went straight to Trey's barndominium. He parked in the front yard and walked up the steps to Trey's front door. He opened the screen door and gave a couple of quick raps. No answer. Ronald walked to the backyard. He repeated on the back door the same thing he had done on the front. He looked across Trey's backyard. There was a tree that had been snapped in half with the large trunk tossed over 50 feet, and Ronald walked and sat down on the remaining stump. He pulled his cell phone from his jacket and hit *607 and listened to the ring. The voice on the other end was that of Bucky Meeks. Hey Bucky, this is Ronald. You know where Trey is? Ronald asked. Is this line secure? Bucky said. Well, of course, Ronald said. I don't know actually. He and Ty are doing some business in Miami, Bucky said. There are about 30 more bicycles in my cellar than normal, which is usually 0, Ronald said. Oh man, sorry about that, we didn't think you would ever know. Ty put them there. Trey said it would be a great safe place. We didn't plan on the storms rolling through there and you finding them. Mr. Sir thought a cellar in Podunk, Indiana would be a great place to hide them. I promise they will be gone in a few days, Bucky said. It isn't me not knowing. I get it. This is for my safety. What I don't know, I can't tell, right? But the problem is Bob Terrell, he saw the boxes, Ronald said. Shit, this guy just keeps getting in the way, Bucky said. Okay, I will make sure the bikes are moved quickly. I will call Mr. Sir and see what can be done. And Ronald, keep Bob out our business, Bucky said. 10-4, Ronald said. Chapter 20: The Final Stage. For 7 days, Ronald stayed at the Minceville Shady Side Rest Hotel. He sat and waited to hear from Bucky and didn't. He would go to his house daily and Bob would come by, and a few other citizens, and they helped him clean up. They had to pry Bob's truck from the tree. It was totaled. Ronald had installed a lock on the outside of his cellar. There would not be any more accidental sightings of the electric bike boxes. On the 8th day, while carrying out wet boxes to the trash, Bob, who was helping, asked of Ronald, "Did you get the bikes sent to the other towns?" Yeah, I did," Ronald answered. As he automatically glanced toward the cellar, he noticed the lock hung open. "Hey, Ronald, can you get those to the dumpster there? I am going to check the cellar. I think I left something in there the other day." Ronald did see it. The lock was left hanging. Ronald was hoping this was a sign the bikes were gone and nothing worse. When he was alone, he would check the cellar. The volunteers helped to place a temporary roof over Ronald's kitchen, and he planned on staying here tonight. In his own home. He longed for his own bed. The Minceville local hotel didn't provide the comfort of the hotels that he and Trey might stay in during exotic stays on missions. As evening fell, he lay on his couch watching the TV mounted on the wall. It was July 4th and the Reds of Cincinnati were visiting the Los Angeles Dodgers. Ronald had been a Reds fan since he was a youngster. He had loved the '90s team led by Barry Larkin and Eric Davis. This new team is led by the electrifying Ely De La Cruz. He was beginning to doze as the 7th inning stretch was being sung and the announcers suddenly began blaring. Ronald quickly rose and watched in horror as plastic jugs were exploding all over the pitcher's mound. "What the world?" Ronald mumbled. The national broadcast was screeching and then settled to a soothing voice. It was the unmistakable voice of Mr. Sir. Ronald had only heard his voice once, but he knew the voice. Immediately Ronald knew that somehow Bucky had hacked a presumed unhackable system. The voice rang out through the TV, on the radio broadcast, in the stadium. People were filming on their phones not knowing who the voice belonged to and why. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. America was founded on the idea of freedom, and on this day that we celebrate, you are freer than ever. You are freer because splattering in front of you are the remains of more than 50 billionaire pedophiles. The people that the internet has been exploding are trying to find where they went. Podcasts and news features. We are eliminating them. These evil and scornful men and women will no longer be able to hurt and defile young people. You no longer need to try and solve the mystery of the missing billionaires. And for anyone associated with them, you cannot hide. Like cockroaches, you are being brought into the light, but unlike cockroaches, this apocalypse you will not survive. People, you are free from these drainers of society. All of us have been slaves to their political motives, to their control of the media, to their evil parties and orgies. Politicians, you are on notice. No more printing money to force inflation that is unwanted. No more assassinations and staged attacks. No more Oswalds. It is over. You are forewarned. These leeches on society have bribed district attorneys everywhere to remove men from the home. Unlawfully. It has left families without fathers and husbands. It forces people to be members of the nanny state, and as often as possible they can remove children from the home of the mothers who were left as the men go to prison. These children go into the system where they can be abused, and many times sold into sex slavery. This will end. No more fake news. If you watch 1000 television news, you can see the same lies. It is a satanic choir of garbage. It is over for all these people. You are going to be free. We will remove the FBI, the CIA, the DOE. They are going to be replaced with agents who are for the people and not against them. As the scripture says, the Son shall set you free and you shall be free indeed. The devolution will soon be complete. For those of you in the Lords of Brimstone that are still alive, you can run but you cannot hide. The shield of Abraham has put you on notice. We are coming. Ronald sat back on his couch, surveyed all he had seen and heard. He then mumbled, "We are coming. Semper Fi. Hunting season, destruction of the puppet masters."